Hello, I'm Neil Dealey, co-founder and partner of Architects and Urban Planners Metropolitan Workshop. Welcome to Reshaped, a podcast series to mark our 15th year and to record perspectives on how the built environment is changing and needs to change in this historic moment. We asked leading thinkers and doers to respond to issues highlighted by the pandemic while we're in the throes of change, and memories and perspectives are fresh. Has the door opened to a new era? We think so. The built environment professions, perhaps especially architects, will have to tackle a number of major issues post-pandemic. Are government proposals to shake up our planning system a good idea? Is COVID killing the city? And are workplaces and homes still fit for purpose? What will the outcome of the Grenfell inquiry mean for architects, and how might it change the way we design and procure buildings? President-Elect of the Royal Institute of British Architects and co-founder of Architects Allford Hall Monaghan Morris, Simon Allford, tackles these questions and more in this episode.
The planning white paper I think it's quite a green white paper. There's been a lot of noise and a lot of panic around it. In my view, overall, it's a good thing. Planning's become exclusive and expensive. I've looked at it, I've talked to quite a few experts about it, and in my view, what it's trying to do is open up the opportunity to build homes in what I think were generally the Tory shires. And I think that's an important thing that needs to be done if we're going to solve the housing crisis. I think it's actually a huge opportunity for architects to get involved in their community, in the writing of local design codes. I think the real challenge is what is a good design code and what is a bad design code, and how much do you limit design and how much do you open up design for the future designers. But I think it's an opportunity for the profession, and I think the deregulation of planning in certain areas is vital. For instance, Shoreditch is a very different place to what it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, partly because of the deregulation of the use class orders that allowed artists to flood into disused warehouse. So it's part of an ongoing dynamic. I think it is vital that, buildings are converted from offices to housing. What's important is there are adequate controls in place to make sure that converted housing is as good as it can be and as good as new housing. And that is also an opportunity for designers to design good housing. COVID obviously is dominant in our lives at the moment, as the plague was once much more dominant. I think obviously the news of a vaccine means people are beginning to come out of a potentially unending tunnel. They can see light at the end of the tunnel, and that's really important. COVID's obviously been devastating to the economy, devastating to less privileged people, less privileged school kids who haven't had schools. There's been, decimation of certain industries, such as the hospitality industry. But there's also good things that will come out of COVID. The carbon agenda, which is absolutely essential to our future, will be informed by COVID. The wellness agenda, COVID is accelerating better practice, and part of that better practice is more flexible ideas of work. So, COVID has taught us all to do Zoom calls as we are now, or Teams calls, to measure where we travel. It's reduced flying. It's still allowed us to communicate. So I think lots and lots of good has come out of obviously what is a terribly difficult situation in the world. But when we get through it, we've got to remember the good lessons. Will COVID kill the city? No, it won't kill the city. Will it kill the office? No, it won't kill the office. People need to come together to congregate, to meet, to exchange ideas, to be stimulated by conversations and colleagues. What it might do is affect our thoughts about residential accommodation. It might inform our thoughts about space standards. It's easy for me to say I can work from home because I've recently completed a home office, but I'm 59. I can just about afford one now. There's a whole generation or two below me where 2 or 3 people might be working from the same living room. And there's a challenge to inform future residential design. And so, in a sense, it's another example of design coming from a constraint and challenge, and we as a profession need to be showing the design leadership to help solve those problems. I recently ran a campaign and became President-Elect of the RIBA, and I really raised a number of issues that I thought we as professionals faced. Primarily, long-term, it's got to be a designing for a low-carbon economy or a net zero carbon economy. But let's be realistic. That is incredibly difficult. It doesn't mean we shouldn't embrace the problem, but it's going to be very, very tough. So we need to be honest and record where we're failing and where we're succeeding. So that underpins everything. COVID itself is a design challenge, and we've talked about that and how it's going to affect the way we think about cities, infrastructure, schools, education, communication, how we need to house people in different ways at work and at play and, in universities. Out of COVID comes a recession. That's going to challenge us as well. The recession is going to challenge the way we think about working. And I'm afraid to say, as a profession, too often faced by a recession, there's a race to the bottom line in fees. And we've got to resist that. And of course, Grenfell is going to come and affect us very heavily next year. There will be, I have no doubt, numerous recommendations coming out of the Grenfell reports and the Grenfell kind of case that will start to challenge how we contract, who is responsible. Now, in my view, again, out of that tragedy becomes an opportunity for us all to do better. I think one of the great challenges we're going to face as a profession is how we contract and procure. I actually think the Grenfell report will force greater responsibilities on us that we need to embrace. 15 years ago, when when Metropolitan Workshop was founded, design and build was strong and getting stronger. And there was a generation of architects who were resisting it and wanted to revert to the more traditional contracts. I think that moment of reverting to traditional contracts has gone. But what we will see moving forward is a new form of design and build with much greater clarity and responsibility, where the designer's kind of matrix of responsibilities through the management of that process is kind of more embedded. So you're taking risks and responsibility in a considered way. And I think that's the kind of thing that we as a profession need to get hold of and be leading on it, not waiting to criticise contracts that emerge, but starting to suggest models for those contracts. So 15 years ago, the internet, email and the communication network, which now dominates our lives, sometimes to our detriment, was fairly kind of nascent. And there was a view that we would all one day be living in barns in Wales and wouldn't need to meet because the internet would kind of destroy the city. And COVID mirrors that, I think, incorrect prophecy of the future. The reality is people have always come to cities to be civilized or uncivilized, to congregate. And, so there's a saying, The Economist writes that, the office is dead. I have a joke, the office is dead, long live the office. We haven't been clocking in for 15 years. People have been working at home, on the phone, on a train, in a plane, in another country. But we still want to come together to meet and exchange ideas.
That was Simon Allford. His view is that changes proposed in the government's planning white paper are a good thing because the system has now become exclusive and expensive. He welcomes an element of deregulation. It's a controversial view. Is he right in suggesting that the changes proposed will offer architects a huge opportunity to influence design codes for development, but it isn't clear that that will be on the table? He might have his work as RIBA president cut out to persuade planners to send the invitation. Reinventing offices, homes and the city post-COVID will offer opportunity to use design to problem solve, and he's convinced that post-Grenfell, the role of architects in procurement and contracting must change. That too is opportunity knocking, he argues. He is clearly a glass half full kind of guy. And no, we certainly aren't planning to be working from a rural barn anytime soon. You can listen to other podcasts in the Reshape series at all the major providers, or go to our website metwork.co.uk. Series directed by Lee Mallet, produced by David Michon and Justina Green, recorded and edited by Sean Crook.